What is happening out there, Roto Scouts baseball fans? Happy Thursday afternoon, gang. Early start today, 2:15, 17, 19, whatever it is. Close enough. For a brief moment there, I forgot that having an early show means that I have to start the show early. I was kind of just doing my thing, getting the site updated, and just slipped my mind that I actually had to sit here and start the show and talk to everybody. So a couple minutes late, apologies for that. Just got all the lineups updated in the projection, so everything up on the site is up to speed. We have all of the 4 p.m. games confirmed lineups. Just waiting on those 7 o'clock game, the 7 o'clock game that is on the DraftKings slate, but not the FanDuel slate. 3-gamer on FanDuel. Sprint from all 3 games starting between 4:05 and 4:15. Should be a lot of fun. Solid little slate. Only limited things to talk about, but we'll go through it all. DraftKings adding the 4th game makes it a little bit more interesting. A couple of pitching options at least added to the board in that one. I like one better than I like the other one. But we'll go through that game as well. You got to wait till the end if you're a DraftKings gamer to get that game. We're not starting in reverse or anything. But FanDuel, you lock at 4:05, so we do have to get started so that we just make sure that we don't talk our way through lock. That said, if we have to talk our way all the way up to lock, I'm just playing one lineup in this slate, so I've got it built already. It's in there. It's probably super chalky, but we're going to slide on through the chalk with a unique lineup. That's the way I approach baseball. I have no issues going chalk stack, popular pitcher, because I'm usually pretty confident that I'm going to be putting together combinations that other people aren't necessarily going to be going to. We almost got there with our Pirates yesterday. Our guy Michael A. delivered a double early in the game. Looked like they were going to be primed for some success early on and just got away from them. Kind of squandered a couple opportunities and they just didn't quite deliver. We did get our home run pick out of Jack Suwinski, back-to-back days for the home run pick of the day. It always feels good to start the season. It's a nice reminder that I can do this. Right? You always get there the first couple of days, it's like, shit, I lost it. I haven't been able to get the home run pick right over like 4 days, which I'll go 2 weeks, at a certain point during the season without getting one right. But it always feels good to get a couple, and getting back-to-back felt great. It was weird for Suwinski. He waited until they brought in a lefty to face him later in the game in a not a key spot because there's nobody on, but hit his home run off of a lefty of all things. Comes right back with a 13.4. Pretty nice mark on the Pirates today. I think the Pirates are going to be very chalky again. I think they're totally worth going to again. They're going up against one of our favorite targets in fantasy baseball. We've been going after Josiah Gray for years now, guys. This is a primed spot for the Pirates. You can see 4 guys in the lineup up over the magic number, a couple guys chasing it. Looks like a killer spot. Devin Scott says almost they left like 8 guys on. That's problematic when you're not bringing the guys around when they're setting the table up. But again, right back to it today. Josiah Gray, even when he's not giving up the ridiculous number of home runs that he gives up, he just walks too many guys. He gives you a ton of opportunities to beat him. You can beat him with hits if you're not hitting home runs. So really like the upside for the Pirates, even with popularity today. Mamba, another one? Nice, dude. I was gonna come in and talk about that. I was gonna say nobody posted any big good news in the Discord last night, so maybe we had a down day. But Mamba comes in, knocked down 10 grand yesterday. Love it, dude. That's 3 days in a row with solid winners. I like that better than I like hitting the home run pick. That's awesome, man. Good to hear. Congrats, buddy. Couldn't happen to a better guy. Mamba had his Nationals call yesterday. That was turned out to be right. We got Gallo in there in our discussion during the show. I know we were talking about that a little bit in Discord after the fact. So love that came through. That's awesome, bud. Let's get another one out there. Who wants it today? Somebody else out there. Go out. Not that I don't want Mamba to win again, but let's get somebody else on the board too. But we also had Stephen B. take down about 15 grand going into day before yesterday. So not a bad little stretch here to start the season. Let's say hi to everybody. Cujo's in the first one in the door as usual. I am having a good day, Cujo. Nice little afternoon of baseball, nice easy Thursday to get through. I'll have time to, take a more casual approach rather than like frantically trying to knock out the basketball projections before lock hits after a baseball show while building baseball lineups today. It'll be a little bit more of an easygoing Thursday. So I'm kind of enjoying that. I'm kind of happy about it. It's for a change over the last couple of days, not pouring rain outside. So maybe we'll even get out and take a stroll with the pooch a little bit later on. He hates it when it's raining. He gets all a little bit frantic with wanting to go out on patrol and check out all his smells around the neighborhood and let everybody know that he's still here. We got Larry C in the chat. Tom from MySpace is here. Cujo Blue, Lone Wolf, Devin Scott, Beach Bum. Beach Bum says, yo, let's go Twins. That game's got the best pitching. I don't think that there's any reason to believe that the Twins couldn't succeed here. I have their pitcher in my placeholder lineup. But Tanner Bybee's pretty good. But yeah, I would say if I'm picking a side in that one, it would probably be the Twins side, both for stacking for DFS purposes, for grabbing the pitcher, and if I'm booking a win, if I'm trying to bet on the win, I'm going to give it to the Twins there. So, yeah, I'm with you. Let's talk first game. We'll talk quick game environment look. There is a little bit of weather in the Washington area. By all accounts, they're going to have time. It might start in a delay kind of a thing. And then as long as they wait a little bit, so maybe it won't be a total sprint through the slate. But keep an eye on it because Washington's really fickle with what they do with weather. They've had a few weird ones over the years where it's like, 15 minutes before a dry game, they postpone it because they might rain later on and, all kinds of wacky shit. So just keep an eye on the Washington game, but I expect it to go. This is the wrong tab. This is for old reasons. I have the schedule. I have to type this in 2 spots every day, and I've never fixed it. Don't know why. So I put the schedule in this format here, and then I do the runs over here. I don't know why. I don't know what any of this shit does anymore. There's so much stuff. This was Josh's old. When you what's the even distribution for a stack? When you're putting it in an optimizer, like what's the percentage I should ask for to get an even distribution across all teams? That was an old chart that Josh made. This calculates the potential plate appearances based on the implied runs. This is the projected plate appearances for the leadoff hitter for each of home and away, which is what then feeds the hitter projections in terms of coming up with like the overall number of plate appearances each guy is projected for. That's what that is. But anyway, I was here to show you guys the run board. So that Pirates and Nationals game comes in with the highest run total at 9. Pirates favored 4.66 implied total. Not a bad total on the other side, though. The Nats notably better against left-handed pitching last season, going up against Martin Perez, who is a non-threatening lefty. He can have good starts here and there. Veteran guy, a lot of get by on guile type, but he had like a 15% strikeout rate last year. So the Nats come in at a fair 4.44 implied total themselves. It's not a bad spot to consider some Nationals bats too. Guardians and the Twins, the one we were just talking about a second ago, 7.5 run implied total, the lowest on the board. Best pitching in that game with Bybee and Lopez going. 3.42 implied total for the Guardians, 4.17, a little bit more meat on the bone for the Twins. The Marlins at the Cards, 8.5 run total there. Marlins fairly significant underdogs. 3.87 implied total for them, 4.73 Marlins going against Lance Lynn. The Cardinals going up against Ryan Weathers, which is a big target on this slate. So somebody said it in the Discord, Pirates and Cards. I haven't even looked at ownership, but I'm sure they're going to be the chalk of the day. And it makes total sense to me. Even with the version of the Cards lineup that we got, I actually like it a little bit better than I like the projected one. So we'll talk our way through that. And then the night game that's only on the DraftKings slate, the White Sox going up against the Royals, 8-run total there. Royals pretty heavily favored, 3.5 run total for the White Sox, and a 4.5 run total for the Royals, basically. So that's our 4 games. So let's start with Josiah Gray. We talked about him ahead of his last start. Let me pull up the notes. Full everything up on the site. Oh, I realized too that I forgot to do it during yesterday's show, but we still haven't gotten there with integrating Ace Mind into our process here for what I'm displaying on shows. But I do want to remind you guys that we have our sim partners, Ace Mind. acemind.io. And it doesn't appear to be, I don't appear to be logged in for reasons. Let me make sure there we go. So our sim partners over at AceMind. This is your sports selection. PGA, college basketball, MLB, NBA, MMA, and NFL. Simulations and optimizers for all those sports. I haven't really played around with the MLB tools yet. It's probably not the best spot to do it in. Well, let's take a quick peek. Oh, that's right. I have to upload the projections. We're going to stop right there because I don't have a template built to upload the projections. So what you do there is you upload the projections. You can pull down their template and just drop it in, and then just paste the projections for the guys in. It's pretty straightforward. And then you upload that. You've got your full run with the optimizer. You can build out your lineups. And then what I love is just a click, 2-3 clicks. You import those lineups from the optimizer into the Sims. And this is what I was doing for a lot of NBA. And then you just run the Sims within the tool there. More to the point, since we've got a little partnership going with those guys, if you do want to go over there and check them out, they offer 3 free days right off the top just to evaluate the tool. And then if you use promo code rotoscouts, all caps, you get a first month, 20% off your first month over there on top of the 3 free days. So not a bad offer. And the prices are significantly, worlds and worlds lower than what you see around the industry. They're fair prices. They're not break the bank. Only the top 1% of all players can afford them. They're Sims for the people, which I love. So check those guys out. Forgot to plug them yesterday, so I wanted to take care of that off the top. All right. What else was I doing? I was going to the site to pull up the article. So the article's free on the site. Projections, hitter projections, pitcher projections are free on the site. Home run picks are up on the site. The power index, the top stacks models up on the site. So everything up there. Looking at the article, what I wanted to pull out of here was Josiah Gray's first start numbers, which were not good. We talked about him going into that one. It was a start in Cincinnati, so there is a little bit of ability to forgive some of what happened, namely probably the 2 home runs that he allowed, but that's been his thing. That's why we target this guy for years now. He's been really bad with allowing home run power. Improved in that department a little bit last year, but it was at the sacrifice of some of his strikeout rate. We'll take a look at some of that. But his first start, 4 innings against Cincy, gave up 2 home runs, 8 total hits, 7 earned runs in 4 innings. I think he did struck out 6 Reds in that start. So he does have a little bit of strikeout potential along with it if you catch him on the right day. If you get him on the day where he manages to strike guys out and avoid giving up power, that's when you can maybe squeeze a little bit of life out of Josiah Gray. And it's not out of the question that he could do that against this Pirates team. But this is what I was talking about in terms of the sacrifice of strikeouts for limiting power a little bit more. 2 years ago, an atrocious 6.19% home run rate on 12.2% barrels. 2022, that went to 5.86, which is still just awful. Improved on the barrels a little bit more, 10.7% barrels, 5.02 ERA, 4.57 xFIP. But he was striking guys out at a better clip those years, 24.8% over 70 and 2/3, and then 23.7% over 148 and 2/3 in 28 starts in 2022. That dipped to just 20.5% over 159 innings and 30 starts last year. 3.91 ERA was a better mark than he had posted in any of these years, but his 5.12 xFIP was actually higher than both of those years. So under the covers, what he really was worse. 1.46 whip with a higher walk rate than either of those years. So he dipped in strikeouts, lost a few walks, but he was just kind of dancing around, I think, the sweet spot for some of those hitters, trying to not cough up home runs. So it cost him the ability to strike out hitters on the corners. It's cost him the ability to get swings and misses out of the zone, and he was probably just working a little bit more out of the zone and a little bit more timid. So I don't think it adds up to a good improving pitcher necessarily. It's just a guy who avoided a few home runs last year. 9.4% barrels and a 3.15% home run rate last season. So if the truth is even somewhere in the middle of those two things, I think he's super, super targetable. I think on a very short slate, if you wanted to mix things up, you could consider Josiah Gray as a maybe reasonable strikeout-based $6,400 SP2 on DraftKings. It's a total dart throw. I greatly prefer the Pittsburgh side, but I do think there's a little bit of a pitcher dart to be thrown there just because it's such a short slate. It's so short on value. In terms of DraftKings, Gray lands right there. That's not sorted by DraftKings. Yeah, that's why I have he's blacked out still from yesterday. Ryan Weathers. But Gray does rank technically by projection just slightly ahead of Soroka, Perez, Weathers, and Lugo. Or no, not Lugo actually. Lugo pops up further. Sorry. I guess I should let me sort this by the DraftKings projection so we get all 5 guys in order there. Lugo and Soroka not on the FanDuel slate. But Lugo's at a different price tier than these guys. Among the truly cheap guys, Josiah Gray does rank out just barely as the best option. Soroka, I don't really trust until we see a little bit of life. Just given how long he's been out of the game. Didn't have a good first start going up against a somewhat capable Kansas City team I don't love. I already talked briefly about using St. Louis to target this pitcher. I think we're using Washington a little bit to target Martin Perez, and I think just the general ceiling, even on a good day, is just kind of lower for Martin Perez. And the reason for that is 15.3% strikeouts last year. He's 20.6 the year before, which still isn't anything special, 19.1% the year before that. So at best, we're looking at like 1 in 5. He's also gives up runs, 4.45 ERA, 4.96 xFIP last year, 1.40 whip, so he's given up opportunities. No swinging strikes to speak of, bad CSW. Gives up a little bit in terms of premium contact and power. And he's going up against the Nationals team that, again, does hit lefties better than they hit righties, at least last year. And some of these guys significantly better. Between the two teams, strongly favor the Pirates. Again, 4 guys in the home run model above the magic number, those being O'Neal Cruz, Brian Reynolds, Jack Suwinski, Rowdy Tellez. Could have gone right back to Suwinski for today's home run pick. I chose to go away from the Pirates, even though 4 of these guys looked like viable options. But I love the home run upside again for Jack Suwinski in this spot. Could easily go back-to-back days. Rowdy has very similar home run power. Only managed 13 in 351 plate appearances last year, but hit 35 the year before that in a full season in 599. Suwinski hit 26 last year. Kind of a weak triple slash, at least on the front end with a 224. The 339 on base is fine. 230 ISO is excellent. Had a 112 WRC plus, which is very good. 12% above average for run creation. He's very cheap. 3,700, 2,700 for a cleanup hitter in a great power spot. 15.7% barrels, 43.4% hard hits. Again, against all this bad over 3 seasons for Josiah Gray. It's a pretty primed spot. Those guys were popular, though. Pittsburgh was a popular play last night. I had my stack last night with Pittsburgh was these 3 guys. And then with those 3 guys all being in the 20s to 30% owned, this guy, who we talked about a lot, who ended up doubling with the bases loaded, put up like a 10 on FanDuel, didn't do much else the rest of the way, unfortunately. He was 6.6% owned. So if you're just looking for a differentiator, Michael A is going to be a good differentiator basically all season. I talked about him in that role last year with the Twins. He delivered 21 home runs, 13 stolen bases. I know I sound like a broken record with this, but he's not going to be popular again today. 3,000 on DraftKings, 2,800 on FanDuel. He's playing every day now for one thing with this team. 7.02 in the home run model puts him on the board for home run upside. We're talking about a low-owned, cheap, sneaky play from the bottom of the lineup. We're not talking about one of the top priority hitters for the day. I'm not saying he's Suwinski. I'm not saying he's Paul Goldschmidt. I'm not, I think you guys get it. But as a differentiation piece, look at the barrel rate last year. 13.5% barrels last year led to that power outburst. 223 ISO. Only a 95, he was worse than average creating runs. He's not a guy who's reliable for getting on base, 278 on base percentage. He's not really a traditional wraparound play back to these guys because he's more likely to hit the ball out of the park than he is to get on base and set the table for those guys. He can do that. If he does that, if he gets to first, he might throw in a stolen base for upside there. So really like going back to Michael A at the bottom of the lineup. But there's quality in between too. O'Neal Cruz off the top, dynamite, potential star, 14.68 in the home run model. Tons and tons of power available for him. missed basically all of last year, but had the 17 home runs, the 11 steals in 2022. And the contact profile in 22 was tremendous. 15.5% barrels, 45.6% hard hits. Just a monster start to the career that year. We just lost him for a year in there. As discussed, he and Ellie have strikeout issues that they have to improve. They're very similar guys in the raw skill set. That's going to be a comparison. I'm going to try and stop making it just because it's going to be made all around baseball all season. But it is at least worth mentioning that there are an abundance of strikeouts. Could put a 0 in your lineup any given day, but he also has multi-home run, stolen base, etc. upside. Brian Reynolds, very solid veteran, 24 homers, 12 steals last year. Created runs 10% better than average. Easy to go back to Brian Reynolds. Think he was a 0 yesterday. Brian Hayes also didn't have a great day yesterday. Easy to go right back to him. He's cheap too. 4,700, 3,200. For the way that he puts bat on ball, 48.4% hard hits last year, 46.8% the year before, sub 20% strikeout rate last year. 15 home runs, 10 stolen bases. Not great totals for counting stats, but there's more there. I promise there's more there. Just needs to learn to elevate the ball slightly to get more home runs out of it. Can drive the ball with the best of them. 271, 309, 453 is a good triple slash. Got the season off on a good foot. So I like Brian Hayes. I think Connor Joe is a playable option. 3,900, 2,900 first base and outfield eligibility. Hit 11 home runs in 472 plate appearances. Not great, but a decent contact profile. 8.2% barrels, and he pushed that up from 4.5 the year before. So maybe a little bit more room to grow. Can draw a walk, 10.6% walk rate, a 339 on base. Not a bad option. Henry Davis is a cheap catcher at 3,800. Not cheap, but a reasonably priced catcher at 3,800 on the DraftKings slate. 41.4% hard hits. 7 home runs in the cup of coffee last year, or a little bit more than that the quarter season last year as a rookie. But looking forward to seeing what he does in a full season this year. A lot of potential. High-end prospect. 3,600, 2,500 for Triolo. I think you can mix him in if you're stacking. If you're making a bunch of Pirate stacks, you definitely don't want to leave him out. I don't know that I stick him at third base, but the second base eligibility on DraftKings is nice. FanDuel, we've got the util spot to work with. 298, 388, 398 is what I'm looking at from last year. Stole 6 bases and created runs 18% better than average over 209 plate appearances. Not a power hitter. Going to strike out a little bit, but if he manages to get to first, it could be a decent correlated scoring play. As a cheap combo late in the lineup, Triolo and Taylor kind of fit together a little bit if you get the home run out of Taylor. But really, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and then Connor Joe, Michael Taylor as the top 2 bolt-ons. On the national side, go back to the article real quick because there's some important splits in here. As a team, they were exactly at a 100 WRC plus league average for run creation against lefties last year. Just an 18.2% strikeout rate against lefties. They were good at avoiding strikeouts. And again, Martin Perez doesn't strike anybody out. They had a 266, 324, 415 triple slash as a team. And that was it against lefties. I didn't put any home run totals in here. Against righties, on the opposite side of the split, 248, 309, 387. 11% worse than average for run creation. So while they're not outstanding against lefties, or weren't outstanding against lefties, they were significantly better against lefties. And some guys were just tremendous. The top guy in the lineup and their best overall player was not one of those guys who was tremendous. He's a lefty. Against Sam-handed pitching last year in 169 plate appearances, C.J. Abrams went just 166, 240, 272, and was 60% worse than average, a 40 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. So C.J. might not be the best player from the Nats today. Tons of power, tons of stolen base upside. I really, really like the player. It's just in same-handed matchups, he might not quite be there yet, at least based on last year. He's going to be leading off. I do think if you build out 150 national stacks, he should be in a good chunk of them, even with those splits. And not all lefties are created equal, right? Again, Martin Perez, 15.3% strikeouts, kind of non-threatening. But there was no average, there was no power, there was no anything really for CJ against lefties last year. So that was a little tough. Lane Thomas, on the other hand, for the season, 268, 315, 468, a 201 ISO, 109 WRC plus. Totally respectable. Against lefties in 192 plate appearances, He had a 153 WRC plus, 53% better than average creating runs, a 242 ISO with 9 of his 28 home runs in the split in only 192 plate appearances, and he slashed 331, 375, 573 in the split. So Thomas is your clear go-to bat. Joey Meneses, pretty decent, 291, 337, 434. Only 2 home runs, but a 109 WRC plus against lefties. He's also cheap. Kibbert hits from both sides of the plate, 289, 327, 403. Just a 98 WRC plus, just 1 home run against lefties last year. But what I always love about Kibbert, who is actually, I'm noticing, not in the lineup. I'm going to finish that sentence anyway. What I love about Kibbert is a 6.3% strikeout rate and only a 3.8% walk rate. So he's always putting things in play. But today we get Riley Adams. In the projected, I had them both in. I had Kibbert DHing. But we get Riley Adams, who was also excellent last year against lefties. He hit 3 of his home runs in just 76 plate appearances, a 232 ISO, and a 159 WRC plus against lefties last year. That's Riley Adams. He moves up the lineup. He picks up a little bit of projection, a little bit of home run power. I had him down here in the original projected. We also get Joey Gallo, who's split I want to check out against lefties because I didn't look for him because I didn't think he'd be in the lineup today. Home run hitter yesterday after we raved about him, which we always do. Joey, last year, limited overall sample last year. 3 of his 21 home runs came against a lefty. 220 ISO, 98 WRC plus. The triple slash really doesn't matter. Technically, he was slightly better for batting average. He was a 177 hitter against righties, and he was a 180 hitter against lefties. Got on base at a 305 clip versus a 300 clip. The slug was down, only a 400 slug against same-handed pitching versus a 448 against the righties. And the ISO dips significantly, 272, but it dips to 220, which is still a well above average power hitter. That's a great ISO. So especially if they're going to run him out there, that's again only in 59 plate appearances, a lot of happenstance. If they're going to run him out there regularly against lefties and he actually gets his looks for the season, I don't mind it. Nats seem to at least have faith in it going up against or putting him in hitting fourth. And again, not all lefties created equal. If he's going to succeed against anybody, Martin Perez is at least on the list. 9.09 in the home run model. That's typically going to be over 10 for Joey. So there is a little bit of a dip there, but a playable option at worst at 2,300, 3,600. Jesse Winker was not good, has not been good against lefties for his entire career. For his career, 460 plate appearances against lefties, Winker is slashing 204, 320, 337 with a 133 ISO and is 14% worse than average creating runs. I'm a little surprised to see them both in the lineup, Gallo and Winker. I was expecting one or the other, and I was expecting it to be Winker. But that's 2 potential holes in the lineup, and Winker doesn't really do a lot on the power end against lefties to justify it. So if I'm forced to choose one of those 2 lefties, it's Joey Gallo. If you're forced to choose from all the lefties, maybe you go CJ Abrams, despite just total ineptitude against lefties last year, just based on the counting stat upside, the spot in the batting order. But I still do like I'll probably default to the power of Joey Gallo in most of those decisions. Trey Lipscomb, kind of a hit tool oriented player. Jacob Young, not on the FanDuel slate for reasons, but he is available on DraftKings at 2,700 in the outfield. Last year, 121 plate appearances, 13 stolen bases, didn't do much else, but 252, 322, 336. And Ildemaro Vargas, kind of an afterthought down toward the bottom of the lineup, does have triple position eligibility. He went... Oh, I closed this window. Split versus lefties. Click on the Nats. Vargas went 291, 324, 476. Did create runs 14% better than average. Had 3 of his home runs and 108 plate appearances against lefties. So he is better against lefties, but not a high priority option. So big yes to Pirates bats. Moderate size yes to Nationals bats. I definitely think they're in the mix for shares. It's just a couple weird spots with those lefties in there. But big yes for Lane Thomas. Joey Meneses should succeed here. Riley Adams is a very good catcher option today with his power in the split. Even on FanDuel where you don't need catchers, 2,200 is just a good price. Josiah Gray, but only on DraftKings. I think you can mix them in just for the SP2 value if you're inclined to go down to that 6,000 price tier. Again, among the $6,000 guys. But you do have these. You do have the Seth Lugo shares available on DraftKings. And Martin Perez, I don't think I would go to. Paul Rayner's here. Paul Rayner says, face purple, raindrops, S, face purple, raindrops, goat, face purple, raindrops, face purple, face purple, face purple, face purple, face purple, raindrops. Right back at you, buddy. I assume those are supposed to be emojis. Not really sure. Devin Scott says Lane Thomas and Riley Adams are so good versus left-handed pitchers. Totally agree. Yep. That is, I think there's very good reason to consider some of those Nats. They'll probably get a little popularity. People were on that stack against lefties last year. Short memories and everything. Who knows? But I would expect they'll have a little bit of popularity today. I don't really like this Guardians team for stacking. A lot of station-to-station baseball, not a ton of power, a little bit of speed, but not a lot of great hitters in this lineup. I think they're very targetable with pitching, even if you have a few guys at the top of the lineup who are very good at limiting strikeouts, and they do. You pick some strikeouts back up at the bottom of the lineup now with Ramon Laureano in there. Some days Esteban Florial is in there. He's not today, but Brian Rocchio had a high strikeout rate in a small sample last year. I think there is strikeout potential here still. But that is the one thing they do well is limit strikeouts, hit for a little bit of average for some of these guys, but very station-to-station oriented. So not a good stack in my opinion, especially not going up against Pablo Lopez. Pablo, the top overall pitching projection on the slate, blowing everybody away 2 points out ahead of Tanner Bybee, and they're both well ahead of everybody else on the slate. 10-6, I think it's easy to reach Pablo on the FanDuel slate, given all the cheap pricing for hitters. It's not a difficult proposition. I have him with the 2 stacks I wanted to go to, and basically only hitters that I wanted to use from those stacks. So easy enough to reach on FanDuel, and at 9,800, easy to reach on the DraftKings board. He was 4th in baseball in strikeouts last year, took a huge step forward coming to Minnesota after a couple of years in Florida. Won 194 innings in 32 starts, put up a 29.2% strikeout rate. Big step forward for him. 3.29 xFIP, a 3.66 ERA, terrific 14.5% swinging strike rate, 30.1% CSW. Didn't allow all that much premium contact. It was just an excellent, excellent season for Pablo last year. First start of this season, it's a very solid start. 7 innings, struck out 7. Did allow a solo homer, but kind of happenstance. Who really cares there? 4 total hits, just the 1 solo home run. Faced 24 Royals over 7 innings, 7 strikeouts. In line for similar kind of production today. The Guardians are better at avoiding strikeouts than the Royals are, but those are 2 somewhat comparable teams. Royals have a little bit more power, I think. If you dance around Jose Ramirez and Josh Naylor and maybe a little bit of Andres Jimenez 2 or 3 times, you really don't have that many threats in this Cleveland lineup. So I think it's a killer spot for Pablo Lopez. And then on the other side, Tanner Bybee. 9,200, 9,000. If you want to take the discount and go to Bybee, it's only a 2-point sacrifice in terms of projections, or 2.5 points. And you're going to a very, very good young pitcher. Young righty, 25 starts as a rookie last year, 24.1% strikeout rate, a 2.98 ERA, probably a more honest 4.22 xFIP. Most seasons we'll probably see him settle into a mid to high 3s ERA, somewhere between that and 4, somewhat like what that xFIP is, but probably a little bit better. But he's very good. 11.1% swinging strike rate as a rookie was outstanding. A pretty good contact profile, just 6.1% barrels allowed, less than 89 miles an hour of exit velo, only a 2.2% home run rate. Pretty good debut season for Bybee. What I love about the matchup too, it's the opposite. These guys do have power, but they have a ton of strikeouts on deck for them. 25.3% average strikeout rate from last season. That includes Carlos Santana at 16.8. He's the only one below even, 21.6%? So an aggressively free-swinging team on the other side. Minnesota could hit some home runs against him. You've got Byron Buxton at 10.78 in the home run model. Top home run option from the Twins. You get a little bit of power, of course, out of Max Kepler. Carlos Santana can still go deep. Carlos Correa could do that. Matt Wallner has a ton of thunder from the left side. Hits too late in the lineup to pick up a ton of home run upside, but this could go higher if he does a little bit more as this season carries on and we feed the model a little bit more info. He hit 14 home runs in 254 plate appearances last year, had an 18.8% barrel rate, 48.1% hard hits, 258 ISO, 144 WRC plus in just 254 plate appearances. I think he's 1 for 10 to start the season. Not that that matters at all, but he's very cheap, easy to get to, hits from the left side, a lot of premium contact. Struck out at a 31.5% clip. I think that's more the target for Bybee than worrying about the home runs. But there is power in this lineup for sure. Edward Julian off the top of the Twins lineup, 3,500, 2,800. It's pretty cheap for a guy who had a really good 408 plate appearances as a fairly high-end prospect when he came up. Finished the season 263 with an outstanding 381 on base, 459 slug, 195 ISO. Created runs 36% better than average, had 16 home runs in the moderate sample of plate appearances. I don't really get why Edward Julian is so cheap. Excellent contact profile. Struck out 31.4%. Sure, that's bad. That's aggressively high. But you can offset that by walking 15.7% of the time. It certainly didn't hurt his on-base percentage. If he's only cheap because of those strikeouts, and that's really the only reason that I could see that he would be cheap, that's a misprice on both sides. He's an easy-to-reach second baseman. Alex Kirilloff never fully landed. 319 plate appearances, 11 home runs isn't a bad total for that, but a 174 ISO. Hasn't really been able to come up with a premium contact profile. 45% hard hits in 2022 was pretty good, but only 6.3% barrels. The hard hits cratered last year. The barrels were just at 7.4% in 319 plate appearances. Did go 270, 348, 445 though. Crater runs 20% better than average when he was in the lineup. Pair of lefties to start things out. He's got cheap multi-position on both sites. So Kirilloff's another easy reach at the top of the lineup from the left side. Buxton's a star. He's just never healthy. A lot of work to do to get the triple slash healthy. Just 207, 294, 438 last year. Still a 230 ISO though. 17 home runs in just 347 plate appearances. Contact profile dipped from this really good one in 2022, but that's still very good. Kepler also premium contact. Another lefty hitter, another lefty home run hitter in this lineup who is too cheap. He doesn't have the absurd strikeout problem that some of these guys have. 21% puts him at around in the neighborhood of the league average. 24 home runs last year, 260, 332, 484, 224 ISO in under 500 plate appearances. You get 600 plate appearances at him, he's got a shot at 30 home runs. Correa for 3,100, 4,200. If I'm going to Twins, I'll happily pay that price for Carlos Correa. Dipped to 230, 312, 399 after nobody wanted him, or multiple teams wanted him and then decided they didn't want him after all last year before he ended up back on the Twins at a discount. Didn't really deliver a strong season. 18 home runs, just a 169 ISO, a 96 WRC plus, but did make full 580 plate appearances. Didn't lose any time to the injuries that those teams were worried about. Just kind of a weird underperforming year. But still managed a 9.6% barrel rate, 45.9% hard hits, walked 10.2% of the time. All of this was roughly in line with who he's been. Bounce back season, easily in order for Carlos Correa at cheap pricing. Willie Castro, stolen base upside, swiped 33 in 409 plate appearances last year. Christian Vasquez is kind of an afterthought at catcher. His best days probably behind him as a power hitting catcher. He had, 2 good years where he hit a decent number of home runs, but only 6 last year in 355. Just a .95 ISO, no good contact. There are other better catcher options. There's one on the other side. Bo Naylor, reasonable catcher upside. 11 home runs in 230 plate appearances last year. Josh's brother Josh hit 17 home runs, 495 plate appearances. Not quite the power output we were expecting before last season from him, but he did, in every other facet of hitting, have the breakout season that people were expecting. So I like him to increase the power a little bit this season. Maybe we get over 20 home runs out of him. It was also only in 495 plate appearances, so we could easily had that if he had made 600 plate appearances last year. But went 308, 354, 489 for the season. Created runs 28% better than average. Only cost 4,500, 3,200. Very affordable today. I don't love the rest of this lineup. I do like Andres Jimenez, who I've talked about him multiple times. An underappreciated 15 home runs and 30 steals last year. It wasn't a great season. I know for a fact, said I was disappointed in Jimenez's season last year as it was going on. But looking back, he lacked runs and RBIs. He didn't get any help from his friends when he was doing well. They had a lot of days where it was Ahmed Rosario hitting up here and Jimenez was buried down here in the lineup. Then that flipped at a certain point during the season. Only a 147 ISO, was below average for run creation. But for counting stats with what he was given to help him out in delivering some of those, for low strikeouts, a little bit of underappreciated power, a little bit of underappreciated ability to steal a base. I don't mind going to Jimenez when I'm stacking this team. I just don't really want to stack this team against Pablo. If you're grabbing anybody, Jose Ramirez is an easy option on basically any given slate. Dynamite matching 10.6% strikeout and walk rates last year. Nearly did that the year before with a 12 and a 10.1%. Still hits the ball pretty hard. 24 home runs, 28 steals last year, a 123 WRC+. It's very expensive, especially for the slate. Not many expensive hitters on this slate. 5,800, 3,800 across sites. He's easy enough to reach if you're not paying for pitching, especially like if you're not rostering Pablo on the other side of this game. You could probably reach Jose Ramirez at those prices. Tyler Freeman, Will Brennan, Ramon Laureano, Brian Rocchio, all kind of afterthoughts. It's a mixed bag of some stolen bases, moderate power, but you can see the output for yourself. I mean, not a lot of home runs in there last year, not a lot of steals, not a lot of anything, except for strikeouts. A couple of those guys. Ramon Laureano anyway, 28.2% strikeout rate. Brennan was pretty decent, 12.5% avoiding strikeouts, but just a 3.5% walk rate. I do like guys that put the ball in play for 2,924. Based on that, just the idea of balls in play, maybe we go to him if you need a fifth man in stacks. But if I'm stacking this team, I'm probably just limiting it to those three. It's easy enough. So both pitchers, big yeses. Pablo over Tanner Bybee, but close enough. Close enough that if the price difference makes a difference for you, I have no issues with considering it a direct pivot. Neither stack really, but if I'm stacking one of these two teams, it's the Twins. I think they're deeper. I think they give more power. They kind of roll 1 through 7 at the very least, and I don't mind rostering Willie Castro, especially with triple position and $2,300 price tag on FanDuel. That just makes him workable. You don't need him to do a lot at that price. A base hit, a stolen base, and a run scored, you're basically there for that price, and you get to move him around the board a little. It's not bad. Again, it's really the three-man on DraftKings for me if I'm going to the Guardian side. Maybe you grab some Brennan and Bo Naylor to stretch it out to 5 if you wanted to. But it's really a three-man lineup. I think I skipped over Stephen Kwan entirely. Slap hitter needs help from his friends. That's going to be the diagnosis for Stephen Kwan for his entire career. Doesn't hit for power. Was formerly valuable. I illustrated this a bunch of times last year. The difference between Stephen Kwan's seasons, between being 24% above average for run creation or exactly at league average, was 33 points of on-base percentage. That was the difference. His hit tool suffered a little bit. He dipped from 298 to 268. That makes up that difference, basically. If he's not getting on base at an elite, like 370 kind of a clip, he's nothing more than a league average contact hitter with no power. So, needs a lot of help to deliver value. As a league average contact hitter, he's no Luis Arraez. I'll tell you that. Arraez, way above league average as a contact hitter. 354, 393, 469 last year. A couple of batting crowns, a 132 WRC+. Doesn't have his buddy Jorge Soler to drive him in anymore. Jorge's out hitting home runs for the Giants now. But a reasonable little group of power hitters here. It's not a bad Marlins lineup, at least 1 through 7. Bottom 2 spots kind of weak. Nick Gordon, Christian Bethancourt. But not a bad 1 through 7 there, especially if you get any juice out of Timmy this year. He's a moderate start to his season, but better than last year's disaster. I like Jazz Chisholm a lot. I think these two guys are a capable like righty-lefty tandem for moderate 20-ish, if they're both healthy all season, mid-20s type power. Berger we saw go 30 for 34 home runs last year. I'd like to see what he does this year. Josh Bell, mid-20s type power, so it's a reasonable enough core. I think they are playable. They're going up against Lance Lynn today. Lynn, the third highest projection on the board. Just a 30 on the FanDuel scale, but it's a decent projection. Drops him in right here on both sites. 8,100, pretty good price, getting him on $200 less than Seth Lugo. Lugo's probably got the better matchup going up against a one-man White Sox team. But Lance Lynn can handle this Miami team. I'm very far from convinced that Lance Lynn is shot. 183 and 2/3 last year. He had a rough season. 5.73 ERA. A much better, but still not good 4.50 xFIP. A 23.6% strikeout rate is certainly respectable, but it's a dip from his previous years. 24.2 the year before. 27.5 2 years back. That's what happens when you get older. Some of the skills do decline, but I like Lynn to still eat some innings. I think you can get there with, even if he coughs up a couple early runs, I think you can still get to your quality start. I think you could still whittle down the damage from any runs or anything with some innings pitched. Better FanDuel play probably than a DraftKings play, just considering the scoring, the way they score pitching. But I like him. I think he's very usable on both sites, and I think he could have a good day against this Marlins team. There are, outside of Arias, outside of Nick Gordon, there are a lot of strikeouts to be had on this team too. So Lynn could have a little bit of an uptick day for strikeouts here. He went first start, faced 17 Dodgers. He only lasted 4 innings. I think he's got upside 5-6 today. Only went 4 innings, faced 17 Dodgers. Walked 1, gave up 4 hits, but no runs. Struck out 5. Against that Dodgers team, that's a pretty solid 4-inning start. So no real reason to believe that he won't go 5-6 in this one. Unless he gets himself in trouble, in which case you don't want him anyway. So Lance Lynn's a yes. And Ryan Weathers is a big, big, big no. Weathers is getting this start because everybody in the rotation is hurt for the Marlins. Braxton Garrett working his way back from injury. AJ Puck's in the rotation as a converted reliever. He went like starter, reliever, and back to starting now. But his first real shot at starting in the show. But that's why AJ Puck is in the rotation. Jeury Perez, they just announced immediately before the show, is now going for Tommy John surgery. So he's lost for the next 2 years, unfortunately. Which sucks because he's a really talented kid and he was only 20? So he was way ahead of the curve. Now we're going to lose him. He'll be back in who knows what form at age 22, 23. But anyway, that's why we're dealing with Ryan Weathers today. And I just think he's a target for Cardinals bats. You can see some of the marks in the home run model. We don't have Brendan Donovan for the Cards today, but we get Victor Scott at the dead minimum on FanDuel, 2,600 on DraftKings in the leadoff spot. Scott has been hitting down lineup most games. To start his major league career, he's now 3 for 25 with 2 walks, a single, 2 doubles. He has stolen 1 base. He's been hit by a pitch. Hasn't been caught stealing. But we're talking about Victor Scott because today he's very, very cheap in the leadoff spot against a bad pitcher, hitting ahead of Goldschmidt, Arenado, Herrera today, no Contreras today, Gorman, and so on. Victor Scott in high A and double A last year in 618 plate appearances stole 94 bases. 94. If you're not familiar with baseball, that's a lot. He also only struck out 16.9% of the time, 14.5% when he went up to double A. Walked a little bit more in high A than he did in double A. The walks aren't really much to speak of. In his tiny, tiny sample of 28 plate appearances here in the show, he's striking out so far at a 32.1% clip. So maybe we discount the strikeout rates, but the speed is very, very real, and he's in the leadoff spot today. So that becomes kind of interesting for stacking Cardinals. I don't have them in the stack that I built, but I do have cards. I have some of these other guys, but this wasn't the lineup that I was using. I'm going to take a look and consider what that min price might buy me in place of somebody else. So he's super interesting. Lefty, not ideal, but Weathers is a non-threatening lefty again. 6.55 ERA, 5.56 xFIP last year, walked 11.3%, only struck out 16.7% in his 57 and 2/3 over 12 starts last year. Gave up a 4.67% home run rate. Super targetable pitcher. Paul Goldschmidt, home run pick of the day overall, 12.37 in the home run model today. Nolan Arenado just off the pace at 12.27. These guys are funny. They run neck and neck on a lot of slates. You'll see that all year long. Very similar guys. Goldschmidt had the much better contact profile last year, actually each of the last 2 years. That's kind of why I went with him as a tiebreak. Just looked at who had the better contact profile, and it was Goldie. 25 home runs for Goldie last year, a 179 ISO. This is where Arenado outpaced him. 26 homers, a 193 ISO. But Goldie was better for run creation, 122 WRC+. He's the better overall player at this point, or better overall hitter probably at this point. But it's still very close. 107 WRC+ for Arenado. 4,800, 3,000 is cheap for Nolan Arenado's talent. 16.5% strikeout rate last year. Puts the ball in play aggressively. Can still hit it hard. Can still hit home runs. That's cheap for Nolan Arenado. Ivan Herrera, I mentioned in for William Contreras today. And we also have Brendan Donovan's out of the lineup because he left the game yesterday after getting hit by a pitch. I think second hit by a pitch of the day. They hit 4 Cardinals hitters yesterday. But Herrera, a catcher prospect we've kind of been waiting a long time on. He's been in their system for a little while now. He's still only 23, I want to say. 23. About to be 24. But he's been lingering in their system as like this highly regarded young catcher, a play everyday type catcher. It was one point going to be the heir apparent to Yachty. And then they brought in Contreras and kind of blocked him positionally because he wasn't quite ready yet. But he's had some good minor league years. Last year in AAA, 375 plate appearances, 10 homers, 11 steals, 297, 451, 500 with a 147 WRC+, a 203 ISO. Quite good. Also walked 20% of the time against a 20.5% strikeout rate in that sample. That's a tremendous season for a catcher. 2022, 6 homers, 5 steals. Again, a strong walk rate, not quite as high, but a sub 20% strikeout rate. 268, 374, 396 that year with a 111 WRC+. A couple of quick cups of coffee in the show. He's made 75 major league plate appearances. Doesn't have any home runs so far. 6 runs, 7 ribbies. 242, 324, 274. Just a .032 ISO. He struck out 26.7% of the time in the show. 72 WRC+ so far. So there's like good pedigree, good expectations. It's taken him a while to get here. He's the full-time backup catcher this year. Should see a pretty decent share of plate appearances because they'll put Contreras at the DH spot a lot of the time, which is what I was expecting today. Hitting cleanup, he's not uninteresting. 2,500 is very cheap to get a catcher at the cleanup spot on the DraftKings slate and a catcher with a little bit of talent. And going up against a bad lefty seems like a premium spot to roster him. 2,100 is very cheap on FanDuel. This as a 4-man off the top on FanDuel, that's an average of 2,600, 2,650, a total of 10.6, including Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. That's really appealing if you're looking for ways to get cheap on that 3-game FanDuel slate. It'll probably be fairly popular considering it's the first 4 hitters going up against a bad pitcher in a popular stack. But it's very cheap to roster those 4 guys. Same thing on DraftKings, 26, 5,000, 48, 25. That works out the same way. I would add Nolan Gorman to that group on DK. Even lefty. I don't sweat the lefty here. 13.65 in the home run model to lead the team. Hit 27 homers last year, 241 ISO. Pull up his lefty splits. Last year, 4 of the 27 home runs came against lefties, but he hit lefties a little bit better in the overall sense. He still had a 219 ISO against lefties versus 246 against righties. Definitely hit more power against righties. But against right-handed pitching, he slashed 231, 320, 477, and had a 116 WRC+ for the season with a 246 ISO. Against same-handed pitching, against lefties, less power, but still the 219 ISO. Slashed 260, 360, 479. 840 OPS was higher than his 798 OPS against righties. His WRC+ was 130 as compared to 116 against righties. So Nolan Gorman, while he might lose a little bit of his power, is actually a pretty good lefty-lefty hitter, at least based on last year's numbers. So again, going up against a nothing lefty, this would not be the spot that I would choose to just skip Nolan Gorman just because the lefty's on the mound. Jordan Walker I like a lot. 3,900, 2,600. He's very affordable for a guy who went 276, 342, 445 last year. Created runs 16% better than average. Hits from the right side of the plate with some pretty good hard hits. Decent contact profile. Decent upside for power. And a high-end prospect pedigree. Going up against a bad lefty? Yes. Sign me up for some Jordan Walker as well. Alec Burleson, Mason Wynn, Michael Ciani down the bottom of the lineup. We trail off a little bit as we get down toward the bottom. Let's look at Ciani. Ciani is 24. Traditional scouting doesn't really like him. Stolen base upside. 22 steals and 454 at AAA last year. 49 steals in 531 at AA the year before that. Was in Cincinnati's system. Not really much to speak of in terms of triple slash, batting average. Pretty weak. On base is not great through the minors. Seems like just kind of a weak hitting stolen base guy. Does seem like he can draw a walk, at least going by the minor league numbers. In his 5 plate appearances in the show so far, 5 plate appearances this year, overall in the show over a little bit last year, a little bit in 2022, 35 plate appearances. 5.7% walk, 28.6% strikeout, 125, 176, 125. Has stolen 1 base. I don't really see much on the board for Michael Ciani here. 1 through 6, I really like this team. Burleson is playable. Mason Wynn, if you need him, is playable. Marlins, I know we went through most of it. That was largely talking about Lance Lynn, but again, you're getting good power out of Jake Berger. 27.6% strikeout rate last year and didn't walk a ton. Needs to push the walk rate up to get even more value out of him. But creator runs 20% better than average. 34 home runs across the White Sox and the Marlins last season. Josh Bell hits from both sides. Very, very cheap. 22 homers last year. Creator runs 5% better than average. Mediocre triple slash. Jazz, I do think, is a star caliber talent. He's only 33 on the FanDuel slate. That's very affordable. 51 puts him among the higher priced players on this DraftKings slate because it's short, but I think he's easy to reach over there. Very good contact profile each of his 2 seasons. 384 plate appearances, kind of lost half his year last year. Still managed 19 homers, 22 steals. Great ISO. Like the upside for Jazz if he can stay on the field. I mentioned these 2 guys. I like the righty-lefty tandem for like mid-20s type power over a full season. De La Cruz got to 19 in 627 plate appearances last year. Sanchez had 14 in 402. Decent little righty-lefty tandem for cheap. Don't love these 2 guys. And then Timmy is affordable at shortstop. So Cardinals, big yes, one of the top stacks of the day. Marlins are on the board for some shares, but head-to-head, I prefer Lance Lynn on that side of that. So Lynn is a yes as the 3rd-ranked overall starter. Ryan Weathers is a major no. Would not roster. That's it for the FanDuel slate. Devin Scott saying lefties against Lance Lynn time and again. Let me pop that back up real quick. So Jesus Sanchez, that puts him on the board, puts our switch hitters on the board with Josh Bell. Nick Gordon, not as much. Luis Arias is kind of oriented toward just slap hitting anyway. So unfortunately, like our power comes from the right side primarily with this team, pretty much outside of Jesus Sanchez. What did Lynn do against lefties last year? Versus lefties. 401 lefties faced last year. Gave up 24 of the 44 home runs that he gave up. Ouch. That's a lot of home runs on both sides. 384 WOBA versus a 311 WOBA. Struck out just 20% versus 27.3% of righties. Had a 5.16 xFIP against lefties versus a 3.90 against righties. Much higher whip. Walked more. For the career, 334 WOBA against lefties versus 282 against righties. 115 home runs allowed versus 100 home runs allowed. 481 xFIP versus a 321 xFIP against righties. 19.5% strikeout rate versus a 27.8% strikeout rate against righties. Yeah, it's definitely a thing. Unfortunately for the Marlins, they just don't really have lefties to take advantage of it. Luis Arias could go 5 for 5 today. I think he's cheap enough that I mentioned it in the article up on the site. Just based on the fact that he could fill that second base spot, which is a premium position to fill, for 4,600, 2,700, and give you 3 to 5 base hits today. I think that's got its value in and of itself, even if you use him as a one-off. Josh Bell will be hitting from the left side. He'll pick up a little bit of value there. That's accounted for in his home run mark and his projection and everything. You get Berger and Jazz kind of at a disadvantage against Lynn and Brian De La Cruz as well. Kind of surprised they went with the run of 3 righties instead of moving Jesus Sanchez up a spot, slide Brian De La Cruz down a spot. I do like the upside for Sanchez, 6.87 in the home run model, hit 14 last year, a 197 ISO. Also did strike out 26.6% of the time. Kind of a young, developing hitter with lacking polish, I guess is the right way to say it. Needs to not hack so much up at the plate. But when he does make contact, 12.2% barrels, very good. 46.3% hard hits, very good. Could definitely be a sneaky home run play. Nick Gordon, not much of a threat. Jeffrey Outlaw is here. Good afternoon, Jeffrey Outlaw. Oh, shit. Thank you for that. That's an error in the spreadsheet. Jazz does hit lefty. I got to correct that somewhere. I got to find out where. I wonder where that came from. He throws righty, but he does bat lefty. Good call. Thank you. That's a boost for Jazz. Yeah. Let me. I can't put that'll change. I got to write that down somewhere. Huh. That's weird. I wonder where that came from. Good catch. Oh, good. I got a notepad open. Jazz-handed. Jazz-handed. I'll definitely know what I was talking about when I see that note later on. I'll just go like this. All right, we'll get that fixed. So yeah, bump to Jazz there. Good catch. Thank you for that. Not sure where that error came from. What else we got? Devin saying Cleveland, once again, a very good plate discipline team. Only a 17% strikeout rating versus righties so far this year. Yeah, they don't strike out. That's their one thing. But there are a couple strikeouts down toward the bottom, and Pablo's good enough to find them. I'm not worried. It's maybe a cut into his true ceiling if it was like a full slate, but we've only got so many pitchers to work with today, so I just think he's the clear-cut top guy on the board. Last game on deck, we didn't have these lineups yet. Let me see if we got them. Probably not. This game's not till the 7 o'clock hour. Nope. So Seth Lugo against Michael Soroka. Soroka, 32 and a third over 6 starts last year after missing seasons, plural, with Tommy John and a litany of just issues with that arm. I think it's in the article in his first start. First start was bumpy. First start back, went 5 innings, faced 24 hitters, which is decent to see, but struck out 0, walked 3, allowed 4 runs on 7 hits, including a homer. None of that matters at all. None of that is predictive or at all relevant, but it's at least worth mentioning, especially for a guy who that was his 7th start in the last 4 seasons. Last year, Wasn't good in the 32 and a third, 20% strikeout rate, a 6.40 ERA. The xFIP was better than the ERA, but still not good at 4.69. A 1.48 whip is bad. A 9.3 swinging strike rate is substandard, so it was a 26.1% CSW. He allowed an 11% barrel rate in the small sample and 6.21% home runs. Granted, this amounts to 5-6 home runs in a 32 inning sample, but he was very, very gettable when he has pitched in the major leagues over the last couple of seasons. I actually kind of think there's some decent talent on this Royals team. They're not overly changed from last year, but they added a good home run hitter in Hunter Renfroe. He dipped to just 20 homers last year, but hit 60 in the combined 2 seasons before that, 31 and then 29. There's a lot of righty pop left in that bat. So I like Renfroe for a decent bounce back season. 3,700 is very cheap on that DraftKings slate. I picked MJ Melendez for the home run from the Royals today. Love the lefty bat. I like the contact profile a great deal. 49.6% hard hits with an 11.4% barrel last year. 43.5 and 10.4% barrels the year before that. In his 602 plate appearances, that only amounted to 16 home runs, only a 163 ISO. I think there's more power coming for MJ once he settles things down. He also draws walks at a decent clip, 28.2% strikeout, but a 10.3% walk. So I think he pushes his on base up a little bit. That was his profile through the minors. So I like the upside for MJ Melendez at a $3,500 price tag against Soroka here. That's 2 hitters in the 5-6 spots. I haven't even talked about their 3 good hitters here. Bobby Witt, 6,300, I believe is the highest price overall on the DraftKings slate among hitters. Totally deserving of it. 276, 319, 495 last year. A 218 ISO, 115 WRC plus. Could do better in the triple slash. Could do better in the WRC plus department. But still hit 30 home runs, stole 49 bases. Monster season from him and still young. Room to grow. 11.5% barrels, 45.4% hard hits. Could do more damage with a better contact profile this year, but that on its own was very good. Vinny Pasquantino, very good bat-to-ball skills, 11.9% strikeouts, 9.6% walks last year. 9 home runs in 260 plate appearances, pretty decent. 324 on base, not bad. 190 ISO, a 103 WRC plus. I just love a guy who's going to hit the ball hard and put it in play that often. 11.9% strikeouts with a 40.1% hard hit. That's got a good chance of going up. It was 46.9 the year before. Pretty decent bat from the left side at first base for only 4,600. And then there's Sal. Sal at first base, fine, 4,400 if you don't want to spend the 200 more for Pasquantino or put them together. You also have catcher eligibility on Sal. He's got 2 home runs to start the season after going for just 23 last year. 167 ISO. We were down mostly across the board last year. 23 homers the year before that, but a 211 ISO was a little bit better. 108 WRC plus. He was 8% above average versus 14% below average for run creation year over year, despite the same 292 on base. So just a few more doubles in the mix there, given the same home run total. Just hit for a little bit more extra base hit power in there. Could easily bounce back to that. A lot of happenstance in doubles too. Year before, in 2021, he mashed 48 home runs, 665 plate appearances, a 271 ISO. Created runs 27% better than average. Yeah, he's a couple years older now, but there's still right-handed power there. 4,400 is a very good price for even this form of Sal Perez. Bottom of the lineup, Adam Frazier, Kyle Isbell, very skippable. At least they hit left-handed for cheap prices. I don't love either hitter. You did get 13 home runs and 11 stolen bases out of Frazier in 455 last year, 5 and 7 in 313 out of Kyle Isbell. I think the guy to talk about down the bottom of the lineup is Nelson Velasquez if he's in there. 28.5% strikeout rate last year, 31.6% the year before, an aggressive free swinger, but a guy who did come up and hit 17 home runs in 179 plate appearances with a 352 ISO last year. It's not a large sample. He hit 6 in 206 plate appearances the year before that with a 168 ISO. But this is an achievement at least making him, that makes him noteworthy anytime he's in the lineup for a cheap price. There is power there. 21.4% barrels, 48.2% hard hits. The barrel rate is at a Judgian type level. So, not that was the same as the year before, but 13.3% is also very good. So it was a very good 179 plate appearances from him last year. What's he done to start the season? I haven't even looked. I don't think he's done much of note. Nelson he's got a homer on the board. 1 homer in 15 plate appearances so far this year. He's also struck out at a 40% clip. ISO sitting at 286 over 15 plate appearances. So not a bad guy to at least keep in your pocket at the bottom of the lineup. And then Seth Lugo. I think Lugo does add a pitcher to the DraftKings board. He projects just well enough. Right here on DraftKings. A little bit below Lance Lynn. If we're going to consider the issues with the lefties, maybe we ding Lynn a little bit more. But a reasonable option at 8,300. A little bit cheaper than the top options on the board. That said, I would greatly prefer to just have Pablo in my lineup. And I mean, it would be a combination of these two in the same game. I don't love that approach. You can do that on a 4-game slate. Just try and, as Gunn says, throw a blanket over the win. If I were playing on DraftKings, I think I would probably go one of these two guys and one of these two guys and just pay the freight. I really don't believe in Josiah Gray, but that would be my choice if I was going cheap. I don't think I want to try and argue my way into Martin Perez. It's at a higher price than Gray, who's got more strikeout upside. So yeah, it would be two of those 4 guys primarily. Like if I was building one DraftKings lineup, I think I'd probably just opt for 2 of those 4 guys. If I'm building a bunch, I would obviously have combinations of any of these top 5, and I would use Josiah Gray as that cheap value guy. And just hope that we land on the good Josiah Gray day for a couple of Ks and avoid the home runs. But not a strong option. There are not strong value options. Lugo last year, 23.2%. Strikeout rate over 146 and a third, pretty decent. A 3.76 xFIP under a 3.57 ERA, pretty consistent there. Did give up a little premium contact, kept launch angle under 10 degrees on the average, but a 9.6% barrel rate, 90.7 miles an hour of exit velo, 44.2% hard hits. Amounted to 3.15% home runs, but if he lets this slip even a few degrees on the average, we're talking about a higher home run rate. So maybe something to watch in the premium contact. But going up against a White Sox lineup with nothing in it other than Luis Robert and maybe a little Andrew Vaughn, a little Gavin Sheets, not really much threat for home run upside against him. I think you can find some strikeouts against this team. The Nicky Lopez's of the world that limit strikeouts down to 15% are non-threatening contact power hitters. 1.1% barrel and 23.7% hard hits to go with that. Went 231, 326, 307 with a .076 ISO. I don't care that he doesn't strike out at that point. We'll just get him out and move on to the next guy. Dom Fletcher strikes out. Martin Maldonado strikes out like crazy. Andrew Benintendi at the top of the lineup. Contact-oriented hitter. Not a lot of power. Might get on base and steal a base and create some havoc, but the 14% strikeout rate for him, I don't really sweat. Then you get Moncada, who was at 30% last year. Even Lubob, who is a superstar, the only threat in the lineup, he struck out at almost a 30% clip last year. That was up from 19.2%, but it came with a big power jump. 20 stolen bases, 38 home runs. Dynamite player, but no help around him in the lineup. Gavin Sheets from the left side, 10 home runs last year total, 203, 267, 331 with a 61 WRC plus in 344 plate appearances in kind of a similar role. I just really don't like Gavin Sheets. I really don't think there's much here. 21% strikeout 2 years ago, 19.2% last year, fine. But just 6.5% barrels and 36.1% hard hits in 22 and 5.2, 32.5 in 2023. It's not a lot to like there other than the fact that he is left-handed and has hit major league home runs, but not many of them. I don't love Gavin Sheets. Braden Shoemake, nothing really to speak of. Midway through his age 26 season, he's made 14 plate appearances in the show, including the 4 last year. Just don't think he's a major league caliber player. Once you hit 26 and a half, if you haven't made a solid debut in the majors yet, there's probably a reason. Dom Fletcher at least went 301, 350, 441 with a 113 WRC plus over 102 plate appearances last year. 2 home runs. And that's exactly what I said about him in the article. I thought there was maybe a little bit something more I could mention about him. Does hit from the left side for very cheap, $2,300, but Not a lot there. Martin Maldonado hits a lot of late lineup, very cheap, very unowned home runs, 15 of them last year, but you're just throwing darts at those correct 15 days. If you do that every day, you're going to lose money. Martin Maldonado, not a good hitter in any other aspect of the game, and not really all that good for DFS purposes. So it's really a one-man lineup that Lugo's going up against. So I do think that Lugo's got a pretty decent path to success. I can take my Lubob one-offs and run with them. If I'm stacking the White Sox for some ungodly reason, starts with him. Probably have these two guys. Most likely it's probably just a straight line from those guys, but maybe I go those four and like Dom Fletcher just to mix things up. But it's not a good stack. Greatly prefer the Royals if I have to decide on which of these two teams to stack. It's a better lineup, better individual hitters going up against a worse pitcher or at least a question mark at this point for Soroka at best. So just a better matchup overall for the Royals. Dev likes skipping Garcia and using Velasquez instead of in 5-man Royal stacks on DK. No issues with that whatsoever. Yeah. Garcia, 23 steals last year. 272, 323, 358. I think I skipped him when I was talking about the team, but no real power or anything like that to speak of. Did have a 50.6% hard hit, which is kind of interesting, but might just be that he's, along the lines cut out of the mold of like a Harold Ramirez type, where there is hard hit, but it's mostly on a line. It's mostly, line drive, doubles type hard hits, steals bases. If he can manage to push his walk rate up a little bit, 7.4% walks last year, not bad against the 22.3% strikeout rate, but give me a few more walks. Get yourself to just be more interesting in that leadoff role, along with that hard hit ability, along with a decent hit tool with a 272 average last year, and the ability to steal bases ahead of these guys. I think it makes him an interesting leadoff hitter like for the Royals. But for our purposes, absolutely no issue skipping him and dipping down to Velasquez, especially at 3,800. You're saving $500 that you can use on something else. So for DFS, absolutely. And I really like the upside for Velasquez's power on the right day. What else we got? Larry C. lamenting the Mets. God, the Mets suck. What do they do now? Those Mets. Nick Slapluski, Brennan over Freeman. Either one have power or speed. I think there's a little bit of both. 13 steals, 5 home runs, and 455 for Will Brennan last year. So a little tiny touch of power and a little bit more speed than that. And then 4 and 5 in 168 for Freeman. Puts him on the board for that. I'll pull up the minor league numbers just because we've got time before lock and we can talk about it. Freeman in the minors never had a season over 6 home runs. Never had a season over 15 stolen bases. So kind of low end. Traditional scouting's got him at a 20 grade game power, 50 grade speed. Does give him a 50-70 on the hit tool. And then Brennan. We got a little bit more major league track record from Brennan. Brennan also never a season above, and that one's the same season across 2 levels. 13 home runs, it looks like he capped out at 22 in 2022 across AA and AAA, basically a full season, 600 plus plate appearances, 13 home runs and 20 steals for Brennan, and then has been in the show the part of that year, all of last year, and then to start this year. So between the two, it's a slight edge to Brennan, but they're very similar, moderate power, a little bit more speed type guys. Reasonable hit tools. They very much fit the mold of what Cleveland does. Station to station baseball. Don't strike out, get base hits, steal a bag, and we'll try and drive you in without hitting for power. They're right on theme for this club. This is you couldn't find 2 more on-brand players to have in the middle of the lineup. Oh, nice. Velasquez moving up the order behind MJ. Beautiful. Let's see what that looks like. Royals is Garcia, Witt, Pascantino, Perez, Melendez, Velasquez, Renfroe, Lofton, and Isbell. Beautiful. We get that updated on the site momentarily. Actually, with a 4:05 start, 3:38, let me wind this thing down and get to updating that lineup just so people have it for the DraftKings slate for the early lock. Summary, Pablo and Tanner Bybee head-to-head, top of the board. Either one of them, totally fine with it. Like both pitchers quite a bit. Slight edge from me to Pablo, but it's a very strong point that he's going up against a much better team at limiting strikeouts, where Bybee has a matchup against a very free-swinging Twins team. Twins have a lot more power. They're more threatening to damage Bybee, but Pablo might have a little bit of an issue finding his true ceiling. He might not need to get to his true ceiling on this slate to win the day, though, because the other pitchers available, not that great. Lance Lynn, I would still have him projected here. It would potentially come down. I'll see what it does. If it changes his projection, changing Jazz to a lefty when I do it, I will update the website. Won't have a big impact either way. Lugo on the DraftKings slate, I definitely think is playable in that 8,300 range. Going up, given the matchup, probably a little bit better, a little bit more playable even than Lance Lynn with a $200 difference. Josie Gray, as stated, would be the choice for the discount bargain bin pitcher among these four guys, but I don't really like any of the four options, and I'm stacking Pittsburgh on the other side of that game and attacking Josie Gray, who I have attacked consistently for the last 3 years to great success. Soroka, I think you can roster Royals against. Weathers, you definitely want to roster Cardinals against. And Perez, I think you can roster Nationals against. Home run board. Home run pick of the day was Paul Goldschmidt. That's up on the website. But we've got a few guys outpacing him by the numbers. O'Neill Cruz, his teammate Nolan Gorman, Jack Sawinski, Brian Reynolds. A lot of Pirates on the board here today. Rowdy Tellez on the board. Lou Bob above the magic number. Contreras not playing. Buxton above the magic number. Bobby Witt above the magic number. Sal just under it. Jake Berger just under. Joey Gallo just under, even on the lefty-lefty. Some pretty good options for power on this slate. Pittsburgh and St. Louis are in my one lineup that I threw in. I like it a lot on the FanDuel slate. I think it makes it easy to afford top pitching with those two combinations, but there are some directions you can go if you're building a bunch of lineups and explore the corners, especially on a small slate. Consider some of the guys later in lineups, like our guys like Michael A. I'm just seeing on the Twins here, the 7-hitter Matt Wallner's got a ton of power, so maybe somebody to keep in mind that potentially could land at a little bit lower ownership. Check where these guys are owned. You don't have to go to a 0.4% owned guy who hits ninth with no power or anything. You don't want to go necessarily to Brian Rocchio just because he's low owned. You don't need to do that. It's all about the combinations, but you do want to consider it at a certain point. With that, gang, I'm going to punch out. Good luck out there. Somebody go win something. Let's make it 4 in a row with winners. Let's get somebody other than Mamba on the board. Good luck to Mamba. Good luck to me. Let's take something down today, gang. We'll be back at it tomorrow for a bigger Friday slate. Should be a fun show. See ya.